$60 billion for a code editor. 4 days after the largest IPO in Wall Street history, Elon Musk spent more money on a text editor than most countries spend on their entire space programs. This isn't a joke. SpaceX, the company that builds rockets, just made the largest acquisition of a venture-backed startup ever. The target? Cursor, an AI coding assistant that didn't exist 3 years ago. The numbers are staggering. Cursor went from 0 to $4 billion in annual revenue faster than any software company in history. Faster than Slack, faster than Zoom, faster than Salesforce, in less than 4 years. Now, Elon Musk doesn't make $60 billion bets on text editors. He makes bets on infrastructure that will matter in 10 years. Starlink wasn't about internet. It was about building the communication backbone for Mars. Tesla wasn't about cars. It was about proving electric vehicles could win. So what is Cursor really about? Why would a rocket company pay 15 times revenue for a coding tool? The answer is hiding in plain sight. SpaceX doesn't just build rockets. They employ over 15,000 engineers writing millions of lines of code. Starlink alone requires constant software updates across 7,000 satellites. And the AI coding market is projected to hit $40 billion by 2028. Musk didn't buy a code editor. He bought the infrastructure layer for the next decade of software development. And in doing so, he just declared war on Microsoft. Let me put Cursor's growth in perspective. Slack took 5 years to reach $1 billion in annual recurring revenue. Zoom took 9 years. Salesforce took 11. Cursor did it in roughly 3 years. Then doubled it in a single quarter. By June 2026, Cursor was generating $4 billion in annualized revenue. They had over 1 million paying customers. 64% of Fortune 500 companies were using it. And their year-over-year growth at one point hit 9,900%. This isn't normal. This isn't even exceptional. This is a category of growth that didn't exist before AI coding tools. The founding team, Michael Truell, Swala Asif, Arvid Lundmark, and Aman Sanger, were all MIT computer science graduates. They launched Cursor in March 2023. By November 2025, they'd raised $2.3 billion at a $29 billion valuation. 7 months later, SpaceX paid double that. Here's what most analysis misses. SpaceX isn't a rocket company that happens to write software. SpaceX is a software company that happens to build rockets. Every Falcon 9 launch runs on code SpaceX engineers wrote. Every Starlink satellite, and there are over 7,000 in orbit, receives software updates constantly. The autonomous landing system that lets rockets land on drone ships in the middle of the ocean, that's software. Musk once said SpaceX was fundamentally a software company. Now that statement has a $60 billion price tag. But there's another layer most people miss entirely. In February 2026, SpaceX absorbed xAI, Musk's AI company that builds Grok. In May, they rebranded to SpaceX AI. Musk didn't just buy a coding tool. He bought the missing piece that makes Grok competitive. Here's the problem Grok had. It was notoriously weak at coding compared to Claude and ChatGPT. Cursor was built on Claude. Every developer using Cursor was training Anthropic's models, not Grok. Now, Cursor's code-base data feeds directly into Grok's training. The first model they built together, Grok 4.5, shipped 3 weeks after the acquisition closed. SpaceX went public on June 12, 2026, in the largest IPO ever, $75 billion raised at a $1.77 trillion valuation. The stock jumped 19% on day one. 4 days later, Musk used that freshly minted currency to buy Cursor. The acquisition was all stock. He paid for a $60 billion company with shares that had appreciated so fast, the deal essentially cost SpaceX a few hours of stock market gains. That's not just smart deal-making. That's using your IPO as a weapon. Microsoft should have owned this market. They bought GitHub for $7.5 billion in 2018. They launched GitHub Copilot in 2021. They had the distribution, the developer relationships, the enterprise contracts. And they're losing. GitHub Copilot's market share fell to 51% in early 2026, down from near monopoly status. Developer satisfaction surveys show Copilot at just 9%. Most loved status. Cursor? 19%. Claude Code? 46%. The AI coding market is now estimated at $12.8 billion in 2026, up from $5.1 billion just 2 years earlier. Microsoft had every advantage. First mover, distribution, integration with VS Code and Office. And they're watching a startup eat their lunch. This is the pattern Musk exploits. He finds markets where incumbents are slow, where the technology is shifting faster than corporate bureaucracy can adapt. Electric vehicles, reusable rockets, and now, AI-powered software development. Cursor isn't just a better autocomplete. It's a fundamentally different model for how software gets written. Traditional coding, a human writes every line, character by character. Copilot-style assistance. AI suggests the next few lines based on context. Cursor's model. AI agents that can execute multi-step tasks, edit multiple files, run background operations, and maintain context across entire code bases. The company calls it agentic coding. You describe what you want in natural language. The AI figures out the implementation, makes the changes across multiple files, runs the tests, and iterates until it works. But Cursor had a critical weakness before this deal. They were compute constrained. They relied on Anthropic and OpenAI for model access. Their growth was limited by someone else's infrastructure. Enter Colossus, SpaceX AI's supercomputer in Memphis, 200,000 GPUs, built in 122 days, then doubled in another 92. The most powerful AI training system on the planet. 2 months before the acquisition closed, SpaceX signed a deal giving Cursor access to Colossus. At their Compile keynote on June 16th, Cursor announced they were training their first fully self-built AI model, 1.5 trillion parameters, trained from scratch on Colossus. No more dependence on Anthropic. No more begging OpenAI for compute. The marriage of Cursor's developer data with SpaceX AI's compute infrastructure is what makes this deal terrifying for competitors. Every interaction trains the models. Every code base makes it smarter. And now they have unlimited compute to scale it. Let's break down the economics. SpaceX wins 3 times. First, they get the fastest growing software company in history, $4 billion in revenue, 64%. Fortune 500 penetration, explosive growth trajectory. Second, they get internal productivity gains across 15,000 engineers. Third, they get the training data and user base to finally make Grok competitive at coding. The losers? Put this number on screen. Microsoft paid $7.5 billion for GitHub in 2018. That was supposed to lock in the developer ecosystem. Musk just paid 8 times that amount to take it back. GitHub Copilot's market share fell to 51%. Developer satisfaction surveys show Copilot at just 9%. Most love, Cursor at 19%. Claude Code at 46%. Microsoft had every advantage. First mover, distribution, VS Code integration. And they're watching a company they dismissed steal their market. GitHub's strategic value also declines. Microsoft bought it to own the developer workflow. Now the most valuable position in that workflow belongs to SpaceX. The $7.5 billion acquisition that was supposed to be Microsoft's moat is now a liability on their balance sheet. And here's the quiet winner. Anthropic still powers Cursor for most users. Every Cursor customer is indirectly an Anthropic customer. But now Cursor is training its own models on Colossus. Anthropic's window is closing. They went from partner to competitor in 60 days. Here's what the $60 billion acquisition really means. The infrastructure layer of software development is up for grabs. AI coding tools aren't just productivity boosters. They're the new platform layer, sitting between developers and their code. Microsoft thought they'd own that layer through GitHub. Google thought they'd own it through cloud. Meta bet on open source models. None of them saw SpaceX coming. Cursor generated $4 billion in revenue in 2026. The AI coding market will be $40 billion by 2028. And the company that controls how software gets written controls the future of every industry that depends on software, which is every industry. Elon Musk didn't buy a code editor. He bought a toll booth on the information superhighway that every software engineer in the world will drive through. That's worth $60 billion. Probably more. The question isn't whether SpaceX overpaid. The question is what happens when the company that builds rockets to Mars also controls the tools that build everything else. Subscribe if you want to understand who profits and who gets destroyed as AI reshapes every industry. Drop a comment. Do you use Cursor? Has it changed how you write code?